Hello once again. Thanks for dropping in on the Mountain West Network studio. Jesse Kurtz and Andy Glockner ready to talk about the headlines in Mountain West men's basketball. Before we do that, let's get you caught up on the current standings in the Mountain West. Wyoming still pacing the field at 5-1 despite that loss to San Diego State. The Aztecs a half game behind the Cowboys at 4-1. Colorado State 4-2, as is New Mexico and Fresno State. Utah State 3-2, and then Nevada, Boise State, UNLV, Air Force, and San Jose State round out the bottom five. Let's talk about those Aztecs. 4-1 in conference play, coming off a very impressive win in Laramie earlier in the midweek last week. The Aztecs have gotten 43 points from their bench over those two games and have allowed 0 bench points. What does that say about the Aztecs right now?
Huge win in Laramie, followed it up by comeback win against UNLV. Now they're back where they have to be, first place, 1 loss. A couple other teams in the mix, obviously, as well, but this is kind of where San Diego State has positioned themselves now. The offensive portion of that is bigger for San Diego State. The 0 points, it was on 6 total field goal attempts for those two teams, so Wyoming and UNLV really didn't go very deep into their bench. And they're going to be in lower scoring games anyway. I don't look at that as being all that critical. The 43 points from San Diego State's bench, though, is vital for a team that is really not too proficient offensively. It's a team that needs the points where they can get it. So now Akil Quinn moved in and had 14 points game high in the comeback against UNLV. They got some offense from Trey Kell. You're grabbing it where you can get it. It doesn't all have to come from the starters because frankly there isn't a consistent starter for San Diego State that's going to provide that offense night after night after night. But a San Diego State team that is playing slow basketball this year, tempo-wise. 4 of their 5 games in Mountain West play have been 60 possessions or fewer, and they haven't allowed more than 0.9 points per possession in a Mountain West game so far this season. So you only have to get to 53, 55 points in order to win. This is how San Diego State has to piece it together this year, and so far they've done so to pretty good effect.
San Diego State likely going to have to score a little bit more against their opponent this week. They're going to play Colorado State on Saturday in Fort Collins. The Rams, of the last 2 games, have won by 56 and 29 points, those coming against Nevada and San Jose State. Bench play has been key for the Rams as well, especially at the guard position.
We talked about it a lot in the telecast on Wednesday. Well, I mean, we talked about a lot of things in the telecast on Wednesday when Nevada was down by, it seemed like 50 for half the game. A fluke result there. Not that Colorado State didn't play well and Nevada played poorly, but whenever you have a record result like that, 56-point beating in a league game, you're not going to see that very often. That said, Colorado State is starting to find itself. And they're starting to find itself, as you said, with some of the contributions off the bench. Obviously, John Gillen coming in provides them a much different dimension of the guard position, a penetrator that can create instant offense. Gian Clavel coming off as well, providing some more jump shooting. This is a pretty good offensive team. And I'm not going to look at one performance against Nevada and one performance against San Jose State on the road, although they took care of business in a way that a couple of other teams this season have not at San Jose State. That's not a gimme when you walk in there, so to get the win like they did was nice. But they're starting to get healthy again. They're starting to have more depth than I think they've had the last couple of years. And they really can shoot. We saw it against Nevada. If they're hitting their 3-point shots to complement J.J. Avila inside and the drives of Gillen and the multifunctionality of Daniel Bejarano, this is a pretty dangerous offensive team. In my mind, the most dangerous in the league. And in a league where scoring is at a premium this year, that's a pretty good place to be if you're the Rams.
Wyoming is 5-1 in conference play, 16-3 overall. Did lose to San Diego State at home, but they rallied on the road against a pretty good Fresno State team. Yeah. Didn't panic after the loss against San Diego State, and frankly didn't panic inside the game against Fresno State, which went 3 overtimes. Neither team led by more than 2 possessions in that game. Had to be impressed with the way the Cowboys rallied, took care of business on the road after that emotional loss against San Diego State.
I think they had to be a little bit disappointed about last Wednesday. They held San Diego State without a field goal for the final 10 minutes of that game, but because they hadn't really played a team that had the length and athleticism of San Diego State, their offense just wasn't clicking. They missed some shots they normally make, and then they had a crushing possession late in that game where San Diego State just got rebound after foul after rebound and ran off like half of the remaining 4 minutes and then tacked a couple of points on it, and they held off the Cowboys for a big win for them. This was a big win to get at Fresno. Fresno has perked up a little bit. Now they have Cesar Guerrero back. They have some scoring punch there. They're starting to find their form, and obviously San Diego State went to Fresno and lost. So that's a game that now Wyoming has picked up schedule-wise on the Aztecs when you compare where they're going and where they've been so far. I was impressed, even after Larry Nance missed the 2 game-winning free throws, or he needed 1 at the end of double overtime, had 2 chances, missed them both. They still managed to gather themselves and get the win in the 3rd overtime. I think that's what you get from a senior-laden team and a team that's used to sort of playing in a specific system. They have sort of a rigidness and a confidence about the way they go about their business that they were able to grind out the result they needed.
Let's talk about New Mexico, a team that Wyoming will see this week. They're 4-2 in conference play, 12-5 overall. It's a team that's forcing a lot of deep shots. They're obviously packing it in, forcing teams to shoot from the outside. 40% of the shots from the Lobos are from the 3-point range. Is that what you're seeing out of the Lobos defensively, making sure that teams are forced to shoot from the outside and then the rest takes care of itself?
You know, it's interesting because they have some pretty good shot blocking. So, but you don't normally see a disparity like that where a team is a very good shot blocking team, but other teams end up taking 2/5 of their shots from the 3-point arc. You can see, as they were the other night by James Webb III, they can be hurt from the arc. And this is a New Mexico team that, look, we've talked about them. We talked about them from the beginning of the season. Obviously, they lost Cullen Neal, so even more hurt personnel-wise. This is not a vintage New Mexico team. I think, honestly, they've done well to get to 4-2 in the league. I think they will continue to be difficult. But they lost a home game to a Boise State team, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But this is not a great Boise State team. They're down some personnel, too. They're still finding their identity. This is sort of what New Mexico is this year. They're not a great offensive team. In fact, they struggle at that end of the floor a decent amount. They're not a great defensive team. They can be hurt in certain ways. They're just sort of grinding out results, and it doesn't mean they're not going to be there at the end, but I don't know that there's really a distinguishing characteristic about this team in 6 league games that you can point to and say, this is what New Mexico's identity is. I think Craig Neal is just honestly just piecing it together game by game and trying to get results, and that's not a bad way to go about it.
Yeah. The team that got them on Sunday, Boise State, is 2-3 in conference play, 6-10 overall. James Webb III hit 7 3-pointers in that game. A career-high 23 points. Here's a guy that is 6'9", that obviously can shoot from long range. If you're looking for someone to minimize the effects that Anthony Drimmick being on the bench now for the rest of the season, a big, lengthy guy, athletic, as Leon Rice has told us plenty of times, but also can shoot from the outside. Here's a young kid that could do some damage for the Broncos.
It's quite a recipe. Like you said, 6'8", 6'9", but maybe 200 pounds. I mean, we're not talking about a banging type forward, but a terrific rebounder at both ends statistically, and that's what this team needed after they lost Ryan Watkins. Again, we've talked about this. Boise State's system usually gravitates around one guy that's going to get a lot of rebounds. Maybe James Webb has evolved into that guy for them this year. But in addition, he's making a huge number of his 2-point attempts. And now, because he banged in 7 of 7 against New Mexico, he hit 5 of 7 2 games earlier against Wyoming. Suddenly, he's shooting, 13 of his last 20, I think, in league play from 3-point range. When you have an offensive threat like that also is helping you on the glass, that's an inordinately valuable player for this Boise State team. You mentioned Drimmick out, and it's really been tough. We've watched this team for a couple of years, and there's always been a little bit of an awkwardness between how Derek Marks and Drimmick were 1A, 1B, who was the guy down the stretch of games. Both really, really talented players and fit well decently together, but there was always a little bit of an alpha dog thing going on there. Now, sort of relieved of having to share the stage, Derek Marks goes off for 29 a game this week as the Mountain West Player of the Week, is playing very well for them, but they need a second scorer, and maybe Webb is more designed to be that complementary number 2 guy than maybe a Drimmick was. In a weird way, I don't want to say it's helpful, but you know what I'm saying, maybe the pieces are falling into place a little bit more comfortably without Drimmick, and then we get the bonus of hopefully seeing Drimmick back next year as the lead guy there.
On the topic of offensive threats in Logan, they found a guy in Jalen Moore. The Aggies 3-2 in conference play, 10-7 overall, but Moore in double figures in 15 straight games. That's the longest streak in Logan now in 7 years. How impressive have you been with the young kid, a sophomore in Logan? Maybe this is the guy that they build around for the foreseeable future under a new head coach.
Well, I mean, he's well known nationally for the best hairstyle in Division I. I mean, that's hands down. Fantastic afro for Jalen Moore. But he brings a lot more to the table, no pun intended. I remember I was at UNLV last year when Utah State came in, and I happened to be there for that game, and I was interested to see Utah State early in its first season in the league, how they were going to adjust to the bigger size and athleticism in the Mountain West. And that game, they lost by 20. I mean, they were never in it. But I saw in Jalen Moore, then a freshman, I said, man, they got something with this kid here. I mean, he's not the finished product, but at that point you could see he at least was stretching his range out to the three-point line. It wasn't a consistent jumper, but you could see the form, you could see the lankiness, you could see athleticism, you could put the ball on the floor a little bit. And, you know, everybody was concentrating on their guards last year, and they had this really kind of raw freshman big man. I'm like, this kid looks like he could be pretty good. And you never know how it's going to go when a complementary player then has to become a leading guy. He is taking on a much larger responsibility set this year for Utah State, and his numbers across the board basically are holding, which is a great sign for a developing big man like him. I'm very bullish on Jalen Moore's presence, and as you said, whoever's inheriting that program is, assuming he's, you know, I'm not implying he's going to leave, but assuming he's there for 2 more seasons, they have a terrific player to build around for sure.
No question. Moore and the Aggies will travel to Nevada and UNLV this week. Andy, as always, we appreciate the insight. We'll see you next week. For Andy, I'm Jesse Kurtz. Thanks for logging on to the Mountain West Network, and enjoy your week of watching Mountain West men's basketball.